think that's what it's all about, is if there's a challenge out there and a problem that enough people have and you're able to solve it, there's just a lot of opportunity there. It's like you said, you got to identify that problem, make sure you have a solution for it, and then you need to be able to communicate that solution to people that are willing to pay for it. It's a tremendous amount of work. Identifying the problem and solving it is one step, but you got to kind of put in the work each day, build really good habits, build a really good team. All that goes well. Then everything takes off, and then you got more work to do. So
Hi everyone, and welcome to Design Development, your hub to learn direct from top performers in real estate development, design, and construction. I'm your host, Renz Hayes, founding partner of H&O, lifelong learner, and I am personally obsessed with high-powered organizations and the leaders that guide them. If this is your first time listening, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you're a returning listener, welcome back. Let's go. It is my pleasure to introduce today's guest, Anthony Fasano. He is the founder of Engineering Management Institute, and his career story is so cool. He entered the engineering world and, like many, aspired to be a high-powered executive at an engineering firm. So what did he do? He studied the current executives at the firm he got to watch. And what he noticed is beyond their technical ability, they had soft skills. He studied them and he worked on developing those soft skills, and he quickly grew his career. But in the meantime, while he grew that career, he recognized there was a deficit in training and there was a deficit in soft skill development and training throughout the industry. And he said, if we have this problem at my company, a mid-sized company in one city, other people must have the same problem, right? He started a company to provide that training and that service for engineering firms across the country. And today his company is helping high-end professionals and the firms grow. Don't hesitate to listen to this. It doesn't matter if you're an engineer, you're an architect, you're in any profession, you're going to get a ton of value out of this conversation. Without further ado, let's get to my conversation with Anthony Fasano. Please join me in welcoming Anthony. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us today.
yeah, sure thing, Renz. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. Excited to get going.
I'm really passionate about providing opportunities for professionals to advance their career, to give them new perspectives to share. That's really what this podcast is all about. So we can talk to high performers in development, design, and construction and share those life lessons and those key perspectives to help others grow. You launched an entire business about it. So for those not familiar, could you tell them a little bit about yourself, your background, and what Engineering Management Institute is all about?
Yeah, sure thing. So by background, I like to say I'm a civil engineer. And funny story, way back when I was in high school, and a friend of mine, his father had a small, couple of person civil engineering company. And at the time, my mom's like, I'm going to call his dad and try to get you, a job there in the summer, in high school. And she ended up calling him, and I got a job as a surveyor working there. Out in the woods and pricker bushes, and I'm like, this is engineering. I'm like, I don't know if this is something that
this
I
is
want to
engineering.
do. This doesn't feel right to me. But anyway, I stuck it out, and I worked with him, and I went to school, and I took civil engineering, and I stayed on with that company through college as in the internship. And then when I was a senior, a top E&R firm came in and acquired that company. At the time, it was Mazer Consulting. They're now Collier's Engineering and Design, but I ended up working there for my entire engineering career. And while I was there, I wanted to be a partner. I think like a lot of engineering professionals get into their jobs and they want to get to the tops of their company as soon as they can. And so what I did, I think what a lot of people would do is I was looking at the different partners and principals and owners in the company and just trying to figure out what they did right, what were their skill sets. And it was just really obvious to me that in addition to their technical skills, they had really sound non-technical skills. They could communicate effectively, right? They could go out and bring in new business. They could lead projects. They could lead people. And so I just tried to really develop those skill sets. And as I was developing them, I noticed my career was taking off and I was moving up and I was getting to do more things. Mm-hmm. And so
funny how that works, right?
Yeah, it was a pretty
you do
direct,
the right things, you put in the work, you think strategically and execute, and things happen, right?
Good things happen, yeah. And so basically I started doing some training there, some lunch and learns on these skill sets. And number one, I loved it because I felt like I'm able to help people build skills that weren't just not taught in school as technical professionals, but we need them. It's like a big hole, so to speak.
Absolutely.
And secondly, the company started seeing some results from the program. I went to an executive coaching school in the evenings. I joined Toastmasters, tried to develop, my training skills, my speaking skills. And eventually I decided that if there's this many people in one firm alone that are struggling with these skill sets, kind of the entrepreneur in me is saying there's got to be thousands of people out there, right? This is just one mid-sized company. So in 2012, I left the company and I started what is today the Engineering Management Institute and just started growing. And my whole goal for starting this company was because I felt that there wasn't enough non-technical skill development resources available for engineers and other technical professionals. And partially at the time, I just didn't think companies knew that they were that important. Whereas now a lot of companies call us every day because they know they're important, right? So
Yes.
I think a lot has changed, but that's ultimately how the company started. And just for your listeners so they know, when we started, we were just doing a lot of free content. Podcasts, YouTube channels, back to our first podcast.
And this is 10 years ago. You jumped right into content.
Yeah,
you were early.
2013, I think was our
Nice
first
work.
podcast episode. So, but the point being is that my goal at the time was just get free resources out there for professionals in engineering because they're not available.
Provide value.
Provide value. They need it. It's not there. That's why I'm doing this. I had several people tell me that it's highly unlikely that engineers are going to listen to a career-related podcast, which is obviously false at this point.
Yes, right. You've proven them wrong. I want to take a second. A really interesting piece there, and for anyone that is an aspiring entrepreneur or is trying to figure out, like, are you an entrepreneur or willing to do that? You were in a company. You recognized flaws and challenges throughout this company. It's easy as an employee to look at that as, oh, poor me, I have to work with this flawed company or this is a broken system. The entrepreneur looks at that and says, there's opportunity here. If we can fix it not only at one company, or if these are problems here, I guarantee other companies have these problems. And you identify an opportunity to launch a business and really an entire new career.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, right? I mean, that's what it's all about is if there's a challenge out there and a problem that enough people have and you're able to solve it, there's just a lot of opportunity there, right? And
Absolutely.
So it's a multi-step process, right? It's like you said, you got to identify that problem. You got to make sure you have a solution for it. And then you need to be able to communicate that solution to people that are willing to pay for it. And, it worked out well for us. I mean, we work a lot in the civil infrastructure industry, which is booming right now. And I would imagine it's going to be for the next 10 years with all the infrastructure investment that's going on.
Yeah, it's massive industry.
Yeah. So it hit on a lot of ways for us right now. But, it's, as it's a tremendous amount of work. I mean, just identifying the problem and solving it is one step, but you got to kind of put in the work each day, build really good habits, build a really good team, and kind of, stay on top of it. And then if all that goes well, then then everything takes off, and then you got more work to do. So, but
in the same way that you launched your business when you identified the problem, that's advice I give to people that are looking to advance their career. Right? You looked at the principals or the executives in your company, you studied them. What do they do differently than everyone else? And how do I develop those skills? Another person in a company, you identify a flaw or a challenge or a hurdle. And if you can identify many, you look for the one that creates the most upside. Which one has the most leverage on return if you fix it? What saves people time? What relieves stress and risk from the situation? If you can find that solution for your company and you communicate what you're going to do to solve it, and you solve it, sure enough, you're going to advance your career because you're providing value. No one wants to lose that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, anyone that's listen to any of our content knows that I'm a huge fanatic about the 80-20 rule or the Pareto principle, right? Like
100%.
20% of your efforts are driving 80% of your success. Probably the same goes for your company, right? Your company is doing 20% of things that are driving 80% of revenue, 80% of growth. And so if you look at your company and you say, hey, this is what's really a high leverage point for us and I could provide value there, and you do it, then you're going to be going places because you're a big part of what they're accomplishing, right? Where their revenue stream's coming from, where their big clients are coming from. And so I agree. I mean, I think it's always important to kind of step back and take a look at what your company's doing, how they're bringing success in. And if you can contribute to that, then, you're going to have a lot of opportunity and a lot of upside there. And I do think you have to really take it upon yourself to do that because you could get caught in a very generic routine where you're doing the same things every day as a design professional, which is your job and that's fine. But if you want to do something special, you want to become a leader, you want to really make some noise in the company, you got to look for those areas where there's opportunities.
Yeah, 100%. And you're right. I would say in engineering particularly, in my business, we design commercial buildings. It's very easy to become good at commercial buildings. And if you're good at that and you don't take initiative to learn new skills or try to advance beyond a project, they're going to keep funneling you new buildings to design because you're good at it.
Right.
And maybe that's not your zone of genius, and you might not get to. It's like your zone of competence, right? And when people hire you and you're efficient in your zone of competence, they're going to keep funneling you work. That's how you get pigeonholed. So, take an initiative to build opportunity, and like you said, communicate. If you can communicate with your leaders, you ask the hard questions and show initiative and try to get buy-in. Now you know whether you're at the right company or not to find your zone of genius. Because if you're not getting feedback when you're having these conversations saying like, I don't know if this is exactly what I want to do, I'd like to work towards this or get this training. And if you're not being met on the other side from your business leaders, chances are you might be in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
But if you have those conversations, you now know, and it gives you better insight into what you have to do to be successful.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And one of the words that you said there, zone, is important, because I like to tell professionals that you got to push yourself outside of your comfort zone if you want to be successful, right? And so it's easy to settle in, do the traditional routines, do what you're being asked to do, but it's the people that kind of go above and beyond and say, hey, I'm doing fine in my job, but I also noticed that we could use some help in this other area, and I'd like to jump in on that, or I know we have a quality control committee. I'd like to contribute to that. I have some new ideas, or whatever the case may be, right? And so I know I always tell the story for me when I was working as a design professional in land development. A lot of stuff happens at these planning board meetings in the evenings where you go and you present your projects to the local board, and then like they decide if it's getting approved and whatnot. And, I wanted to see that process because I felt like it was important, and it was important to me being a designer, because if I knew what the town board's looking for, I could be more efficient in my designs. And so, I asked my company at the time if I could go to the meetings, and the answer was kind of, we don't have the budget, we can't bill the client to bring another person. So I was just like, what, I'm just going to go on my own. Like, you don't have to pay me. I'll go at night. I'll do whatever I got to do, and I just watched how they responded to the other consultants there. I watched how the consultants presented to the board, and I just kind of took all that in. And I feel like that was really valuable in my career progression. But I also feel like, I'm sure like my company was like, man, this guy's just coming to meetings on his own. Like, that also tells them something about where you want to go and what you want to do.
100%.
So stuff like that I think matters, and I think that if you really want to grow in your career and your company, there's really no excuse, because you could do stuff like that.
Yeah, especially early in your career. That's like, I'm a big advocate for separating time and value. Like if we go back to the Pareto principle, 80-20, for creating 80% of the results in 20% of your time, does all the time that you spend really matter? So like I like to communicate to results, outcomes, intent. Like, how are we creating leverage and thinking creatively?
Yeah, no, I love it. And I really think that if you're not familiar with the 80-20 rule, anyone listening, you should go buy the book Living the 80-20 Way by Richard Koch, which is my favorite book on it, because it talks about it like very related to just personal everyday life, not like complex, and you could see the power of it. And I'll give you one quick example for me that's proven to be a game changer. Is I deleted all social media off my phone about 2 years ago, because I was realizing that like I'm sitting there scrolling through mindless crap that has nothing to do with me generating the 80% of the results in my life. Anytime I need to do something on social media, I go on LinkedIn on my computer, I talk to people, I look at stuff. If I want to catch up with a couple family members, I'll go on Facebook and I'll look them up and I'll see what's going on. But I don't need to mindlessly scroll through other people that I don't even know who they are posting stuff. And that was something, these are the types of things, that changes that I've made in my life because of the 80-20 rule. And
Powerful change.
Yeah, just focus on the big things. Focus on the things that matter.
I still get stuck in the mindless scrolling. The golf memes will get you.
Yeah. They will. That's why the only way I can avoid is to get rid of it.
And I imagine in your world, you're dealing with a lot of companies and individuals that are balancing and trying to figure out this work from home or work in the office, especially the younger generation. If we're training young engineers, that's the world that they know, right? If you've only been in your career for 5 years, like more often than not, like you've been in a remote opportunity. Your experience there, where you made the initiative to go to a meeting in person, unpaid, to do the extra stuff, to study the people that have walked the path that you were trying to walk. You got a lot of insight and context from that. My firm, we are really flexible. We have full-time remote, we have hybrid, we have in-office. But one thing we do require is that entry-level people and people early in their careers, we kind of look at it as you build competence in our system or approach your PE, you're able to learn intuitively and create. But early on, there's so much they learn by just being around other professionals. How do they talk? How do they answer the phone? What things are they talking about in the office or with clients? If you're remote, you kind of miss all that. So what's your advice to engineers early in their career to kind of navigate those waters?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the advice I always give to early career engineers is to be a sponge, right? Soak up as much information as you can, as much knowledge as you can. And I tend to agree with you that when you're in person and you're around people and you hear people, talking in their offices, talking in the hallways, you have the ability to really just get a lot of information that you wouldn't necessarily get if you're sitting in front of your computer.
You don't even realize how much you learn from that.
You really don't. You really don't. And the other thing that I would say that's a game changer for engineers early in their careers is getting to the field. Like you need to see projects being built. You need to hear contractors talking about how they put stuff together, because that's what's going to help you. Like I know early in my career, that was really beneficial being a surveyor first, because I got to survey and see jobs being staked out and built. And I remember on one of my projects, I was working on a drawing and I was looking at like a catch basin. And because someone was using AutoCAD, they drew like 5 or 6 pipes into it. And I'm just like, because I've seen it in the field, I'm like, you can't construct it like that, right? Like it works with the lines on AutoCAD, but it doesn't actually work in the field. So I think that field experience, if you want to go back to the 80-20 rule, is one of those 20% drivers that can make you very successful in your career, because you're going to be able to speak to people more effectively about projects. You're going to be able to know how things go together. And then as you grow in your career, you're going to be able to be a better leader, because you're going to be able to communicate. You're going to know what they're going through, right? Like the new graduates or people that are in the field or talking to clients about things. And I think really that's what it comes down to. And I say this on our podcast all the time, is you want to be well-rounded, and you want to be able to talk to clients about different things and show that you can help them and you're knowledgeable. You know about the field work, you know about the office work. And so, and that's one of the reasons that we do our podcast too. And like on the civil engineering podcast, I've interviewed people in different industries and disciplines so that the listeners can understand it. Like, maybe they're not a climate change expert, but they can understand how it's impacting civil engineering, and they could speak on that, next time they talk to their clients. So I just think being a sponge, learning as much as you can, and getting field experience are just critical factors for people early on in their career as engineers.
It builds context. I can't think... context in all areas of business is like the most important thing. Like how do you improve an organization? Like how do you expect your team to improve a company if they don't understand how the company works, if they don't understand where the company's trying to go? Same thing in engineering. How can you expect somebody to design a building if they haven't been on site seeing how a building goes together? If they don't have the skills, the communication tools, the soft skills to navigate conflict, or when there's an RFI, are they defensive, trying to like say, no, do it this way, refer to the contract drawings? Or are you saying like, what's the challenge in the field? Like, does the drawing not work? Like, how would you do it differently? Like if you come from an angle of curiosity and empathy, you can learn so much more from the people in the field.
Yeah, 100%. And I give you another example of that with what we do here at EMI. We do a lot of PM training for firms, and one of the things that I always like to recommend is a pre-PM training, right?
Interesting.
Like to your point, like you could be a better team member for your project manager if you know what project management is, right? If you know that your PM is dealing with scope, scheduling, budgeting issues, you may work better as a PM, right? And you may not end up ever being a PM, maybe you will, but you'll just be better all around because you know what they're dealing with. And so, and it can be a light course, but the point is like, you don't want someone to become a project manager and then say, okay, you're a project manager, now we're going to send you to training, right? It's kind of like I tell people, it's kind of like, all right, listen, we're sending you to Spain tomorrow to work on a new project, and when you get there, we'll start teaching you some Spanish. It's like, what do you mean? I need to know now, analogy. Right? So I think that preparing people is important. I think that, you want to just make sure that your people are prepared for what they're going to deal with, and you're not waiting too long to give them that preparation.
Yeah, 100%. I forget the label for this, but it's like, if you're the best at what you do, you're a great engineer, so we need to give you a promotion. You're a project manager, but we never taught you how to manage a project or people or anything, right? I forget what the term is for that, but it's a huge mistake, and it sounds obvious when we're talking about it, but companies make it time and time and time again, right? I like to say the internet today has like totally changed our world of influence. I think years ago when people weren't on the internet and didn't have all of this exposure to how people are thinking and about training. Training's an investment, right? Before people are like, we have too much work to do. I don't have time to train. But they had their circle of influence was much smaller, and now we have access to so much information and creative thinking that we can all grow and create these new ways. So I love what you guys are doing. I want to get more into the resources at Engineering Management Institute because you guys are doing so much. You mentioned a podcast, but I think you have 8 podcasts. Can you tell us like what went into the idea of going to 8?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll give you the background on it. So when we started a long time ago, as I mentioned earlier, in 2013, we published our first podcast, which was called The Engineering Career Coach. And really the idea behind the podcast was just like it's named, right? Help engineers develop their career skills, talk about some of the non-technical skills that you and I have been talking about here, and get that information out there because it's not available. So when we did that, we got a really good response to it. But I started getting emails from civil engineers because I'm a civil engineer. So a lot of my connections were, and they were just saying like, hey, could you answer some of these specific like civil engineering career questions? I was like, I can, but this podcast is really for all engineers. So I'll start a second podcast called the Civil Engineering Podcast, and we could do some of that stuff on that. And that was like a couple years later, and believe it or not, it actually like surpassed the Engineering Career Coach podcast and listens
really?
pretty quickly. So it told me something from a business perspective is when you get really specific and you focus on a specific niche, it can be very beneficial in terms of, of growing anything, right?
I was just going to applaud you for that. Not only that, like the effort in being visible and trying to provide value, you then got feedback from the market of what people wanted and you took action.
Yeah. That's entrepreneurship, right? Like we talked about earlier. And so that was going really well. And then I actually had an engineer reach out to me for some career coaching. And I started talking to him. He was a structural engineer, kind of hit it off with him. And then I'm like, you know what? Would you be interested in hosting a structural engineering podcast? Because I think that there's tons of technical stuff in structural engineering that could have its own podcast.
Yeah.
So we started that one. Then I had a friend, my wife's a geotechnical engineer, and then she had a colleague years ago, and he's a great guy, Jared Green. And I was like, Jared, you want to host a geotechnical engineering podcast? And he's been doing that, and he's been doing great with it. And that podcast has become really explosive. So then we've built a couple other ones since then, the project management podcast, which is just focused on project management. We have an AEC tech podcast focused on technology. We still have our engineering career coach one. And we have a couple of YouTube channels. We have one focused on a lot of leadership skills for engineers, but then we have 2 other ones, pass the FE exam and pass the PE exam, because I'm a real big proponent of getting your engineering license. And I wanted
you need to get the license.
You got to get the license. It's a critical thing. So those channels just help people with that, questions, etc. So that's kind of how it evolved. And I think, and what's been nice lately is we've been able to start to get some bigger sponsors on the content because we keep it free for everybody. So by getting some sponsors, it's like a win-win because sponsors, we've even had some consulting firms now sponsoring the podcast to get their name out there, help them with recruiting efforts, and it helps us to keep all that content for free. So my point of that is that if you're listening, if you go to engineeringmanagementinstitute.org and you click on content, you're going to see all these channels, and you could basically click on any one of them and get really good information to help you build your career. And the reason I say that is because it's another way for me to say you have no excuse. Because
you have no excuse.
Everything's
right there. You're putting it under one tab, one drop down.
I mean, it's all there. I mean, we have a new show we've been doing for new, but we've had 20 episodes, like the civil engineering CEO. We're interviewing CEOs of civil engineering companies, asking them what civil engineers should do to be successful. So, you can't even say that I can't talk to executives. You don't need to. We're doing it. It's there for you, right? So go listen to it and take action on it.
And you're crafting the right conversation with that CEO. You know the questions to ask. I think sometimes you take someone too early in their career and you put them in a position to ask a CEO a question. They don't know the right questions to ask. It's almost, you want to ask the CEO, what should I be asking you? Right? What things don't I know that would be helpful for me at this point in my career?
Yeah, for sure. And part of the reason that I know some of this stuff too is because over the years, I've amassed, I think, about 15,000 LinkedIn connections because of all the listeners that reach out to me every day. I get 30 a week. So by the way, if you message me on LinkedIn, it might be hard for me to get back to you, but I do get messages. We do go through them, and we do even have a sheet that we put a lot of them into because it helps us with more content ideas. It helps us to ask these questions to our guests. So all the stuff that we're doing is really what people in the industry want. We're just recirculating it.
Yeah. For anyone running an engineering firm or working at an engineering firm, one flaw I see across the board is marketing is generally poor.
Yeah.
Marketing is not, it's a very client focused business. We can put our clients, you can name your top 50, your top 100 and go straight at them, and business development and sales become a thing. And then it's a lot of repeat work over time. And so companies fail to invest in marketing. And I think everything you've talked about today and what it's generated for your business, none of these podcasts, as you said, are free. These are all effort. You've built relationships for people to run podcasts for you. You have several podcasts to hit all these niches, and it's generating all kinds of goodwill by providing value to the market, right? And in return, you get attention that you're able to fuel Engineering Management Institute. And if you could share with us, how are you monetizing? If you're doing all this stuff for free, everything we talked about is just free content. So how are you monetizing? I think you do you have some training that you provide.
Yeah, so I mentioned already we get some nice content sponsors that's helpful for monetization. And yeah, we do training. I mean, we started, I don't know, probably like 5 years ago now, or maybe more than that. I started a course, like a people skills, I called it People Skills for Engineers course. It was an online course. I pitched that at a conference and it sold out immediately. And I'm like, man, there's something here. And basically, like from there, everything took off. Like companies.
When did you launch that?
I think it was like 2017 or something like that, 2018. It was called our Engineering Leadership Accelerator course.
Sorry, one important piece there for the people that are still learning and thinking about the power of content, like Anthony's not out here selling anything in these podcasts. He's just literally providing value. And then you create a new opportunity, a new product, a new event, and it sells out immediately.
Yeah.
Because you've created all that goodwill. Like that's the power of creating good brand awareness.
Yeah, I mean, I think give people good information and they're going to want to get more of it. They're going to want to, converse with you, work with you, that type of thing.
So you launch this event, it sells out, and there's something here.
Yeah, so I launched the course. It was an online course, but I put it out there at an event that with a lot of executives. It sold out, went really well, and for years it sold out. And then we started just like duplicating the course. Like that was like our people skills. I called it level 1. Then we did level 2, which was like conflict resolution and delegation and more advanced skills. Then we started doing project management training because I started getting a lot of increase for project management training, scope, schedule, budgeting, stakeholders, etc. So we brought on a PM instructor. She's awesome. We built the program that mirrored the other one, and that's been unbelievable. And then we built the seller doer, like a business development. So we had these 4 courses, and they're really the fundamental basis for everything. Now we end up doing a lot of custom training where we take our course, we take our clients' PM tactics, tools, strategies, and we kind of put them together. But the point of it is that beyond all that is we focused on a good philosophy, because I'm not first of all, I hate the word training. I prefer to use learning and development. We just changed all of our department names and everything a couple of years ago because the word training in the engineering world has a negative connotation of I go to training and then I'm done. I go to a webinar and I'm done. I go to a hotel for a day and I'm done. And that's not what training is. You need learning and development happens over time. You don't become a great project manager by going to a couple of training sessions, right?
It's a great distinction. I think some people, and I know in the past I've even felt like if I have to go to training, that means I'm deficient.
Right.
In this skill. And I don't know if that person's not ready to admit that, they're going to be like, I don't need to go to this training, or pay attention and get the most out of it. And how I learning and development, I refer to lifelong learning. It's like you got to go into these things curious. And regardless if you're competent or an expert, if you can get one nugget out of each one of these, you're gonna advance, right?
Yeah, for sure. And the story I always tell people is when I was practicing as an engineer at a consulting firm, I used to get sent every couple of years to this PM boot camp type of deal where you go for a day or two. You get a lot of great information. The training, the concepts were great. The materials were great. But I'd get a binder and I'd go back to my office and I would never look at the binder again, right? Like I have no time to do that, right? So we focus a lot on the learning process. Like our programs are all online and they're done like with spaced repetition. So you get a chunk of stuff, then you have to practice it on the job, and then you come back and learn a new skill. So it's very much focused around what I like to say is how people can transfer what they've learned back to the job. And so
that's great.
That's huge. I mean, so at the end of the day, in terms of monetization, we do a ton of training right now. We've got a lot of great clients that we work with. And I think that they keep coming back because the programs are working for them. They're seeing engagement from people. They're seeing real skill improvement. And what that does for you, Renz, is I always like to say a good learning and development program helps you attract people, develop people, and retain people. So you get your return on investment in 3 ways.
100%. It's the most important thing you could do for the company. For the company that's looking to grow or struggling with employee retention or attracting talent, you got to think of a few things. It's like, what are you putting out in the world that's going to attract the right people? Like, do the level 10 talent that align with you, values, goals, all those things that fit your need? Do they know about you? Do they know about the opportunity? Like, what are you putting out in the world to show them that you're creating opportunity that they can advance their career? You got to think about the career development of your employees, and are you talking to them about that routinely, right? And are you giving them opportunities? Because chances are, if you're talking to your employees about where they want to go, these are the skills they want to know. These are the skills they want to learn, the stuff that you're providing. So then it becomes a really good retention tool because you're fulfilling their needs for growth, learning, an aligned environment, an enjoyable place to work.
Yeah, no, 100%. And a couple of things I'll say on that is, one, in terms of training or learning and development, as we like to call it, a lot of firms that call us will say something like, we do our own training internally, but the problem with that is, number one, a lot of people don't think it's good, whether they believe that or not, right? They don't think it's good and it's not engaging. Or number two, they set it up and then their PMs, let's say if they're doing PM training, get so busy with their own projects, they fail to give the training, right? So if you think you have a training program that's good internally, you might want to revisit it and have someone take a look at it or survey your team about it and make sure that it's engaging, that it's working. Because if it's not, then people aren't taking it seriously and you're wasting a lot of time and effort. The second thing I'll say related to what you were talking about in terms of kind of employee engagement is you have to care about your people and what they care about in life. Like, that's what I learned as being a business
100%.
owner, right? A lot of businesses, the way they operate is our employees serve to help us reach our business goals, whatever that may be. But my take on it is that's fine, but then the business should be focused on helping the people reach their goals, whatever they are, like personally and professionally. So I like to have conversations with everybody here on the team. Like, what do you want to do in life? Like, what do you want to accomplish? What does your family want to do? You know? So like, I understand what they're thinking about, and I can make sure that we put them in that position to be happy, because if they're happy at home, they're going to be happy at work. And then people aren't like robots. They don't like turn a button on when they go home. It's like the same. It's like the same, especially now with like everyone working at home and stuff. So
yes,
I think that we have to understand that the business needs to serve the people, not just people serving the business.
Yeah, it's easy for companies to get that backwards.
Yeah,
right.
I think 99% do.
Business is hard. So like you start a business, you're thinking, I got to get work, I got to get revenue and cash flow, and you do all these things. And you're like, I have too much work, I got to hire. And then you hire that person, you say, all right, you help do the work, no training, no clarity. You assume they know what's in your head.
Right.
And that cycle continues, and it's a tough cycle to break.
Yeah,
right.
No,
it is so hard.
That's a good point. And that's why I think an important attribute of a leader is the ability to communicate effectively, and tell stories. And, when you bring someone on board, you need to be able to convey to them, here's what our company's all about. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. And I always tell everybody here at EMI, our goal is for you to be successful. If you feel like you don't have a tool, you don't have information, something, you gotta tell us. Like, that's the last thing you want to have happen in your company, is that people are being held back because they're limited, because they don't have a tool, they don't have a system, they don't have information. Like, that's the worst thing you can do.
You need to create that psychological safety in your own company so you can get that feedback and empower people to help improve the company and the experience.
Yeah.
Talking about career growth and goals, it's a lot of people don't have clarity on what they want. So a lot of times those conversations are just continuing to have that conversation, so you're helping them think through what it is they want. A really hard thing for a business to do is to satisfy somebody that isn't able to articulate or communicate where they want to go as an individual. Yep. It's something I focus on a lot, and I bring clarity to why it's important. What do you want out of your career? What are your goals? Where do you want to be in 3 years? Sometimes in an interview, that can be thrown out there as kind of like just a half-ass question just to get clarity or to kind of confine on like where they are. But when I'm asking it, and I think it's important to approach it this way, is to really learn about what's important to that individual. Because if you understand what's important to them and where they go, and you can then support them, but you can't support them if you don't know.
Yeah, and that becomes more difficult if they don't know, right? Like you suggest, especially early on in your career, right? So that's actually why with a lot of firms, what I try to recommend to them is when they have interns or they have recent graduates, they should have like a rotational program where they can get a little bit of experience in their different departments. I mean, that happened to me. Like I started out doing geotechnical work. I wasn't crazy about it. I started doing structural work. I wasn't crazy about it. I started doing land development and I loved it. And so I think giving your people, opportunities to look at different things is important. I also think that if you're a young professional, try to do some things to help you understand what you enjoy, what you like. Somebody recommended this book to me that I read a few years ago. It's called Where Will You Be 5 Years From Today? It's like a simple, small book, but it makes you ask yourself some questions to think about, like, where am I going? Where am I headed? Which could help you to bring a little bit of clarity to what you're doing. And that's like another big thing at EMI. Like I'm a big proponent of like team building, like focusing on the team and setting up the team for success. I read a lot of books, like a lot of them are related to like coaching and athletics, sports. Like I think that there's a lot of parallels between building a successful sports team or franchise and building a successful company, right? You have all these different players, they play different positions, they know different things.
Agree.
Right? So you look at some of the successful teams and what they've done well is they've put people in positions to be flexible and do multiple things, right? So I don't have a problem with that. If someone wants to learn a whole department and then do something else, that's fine. And then like we're interchangeable, we have more flexibility. It creates like less stress. So there's lots of different approaches, but I think that if you want to understand your own goals, you got to do some like personal reflection, some questions. You can ask questions of people that are experienced in the industry, like what mistakes did you make? What did you wish you would have known earlier on in your career? Those questions. Yeah, ask all those questions or listen to some of our podcasts because we've already asked them all. So they're available.
Yes, that is great. So you're an author.
Yeah.
So not only did you launch a business, have all this content creation, the training, you took time to write a book. Tell us about that. Tell us what is the book and tell us about that process.
Sure. So I've written a number of books, but the engineering one it's called Engineer Your Own Success. And the process was, again, goes back to my goal. I wanted to help more engineers get these skills in their hands, get information about these skills, right? Everything kind of stems from that original goal of when I was an engineer, these skill sets weren't readily available, right? So when I started doing the training within my company at the time, the consulting firm I worked for, I felt like the training was working well and people were resonating with the skill sets I was talking about, setting your goals, learning how to communicate better, become a great public speaker, build your networking skills. And so when I started this company, I said, hey, maybe one of the things I can do is just sit down on my computer and write about each of these skills and put it into a book so that it'd be easier to get it out there. At the time that was like back in 2012, and people were reading probably paper books more than they are now, and now you get a lot of information online. So I literally wrote the book in like 30 days. I just sat there every day on my computer and I type. I self-published it because I wanted to just get it out there. Yep. I took tons of books and I put them in my car and I just drove literally all over the country to like professional associations and I spoke with the book. I gave out the book.
I love that hustle.
Yeah, it was great. It was fun. I mean, I've spoken all throughout Alaska. I've spoken in Los Angeles, Maine, Florida. I've been in like probably 40 states just doing like talks at ASCEs and stuff like that. And eventually what happened was I got contacted by Wiley Press and they picked up the book and we rewrote a second edition, which I think came out really good. I like it. And it was probably much better. It was much improved when you have like a professional publisher like that doing it. But again, like I wanted to get it out there, so I didn't really care about who published it. The idea was to help engineers get better, basically.
Yeah, the value of the book was more important than how polished the writing was. Right? Yeah,
and so the other thing I did for those entrepreneurs out there, when I went around with the books and I did all these talks, I just handed out like evaluations, just like 8.5 by 11. Like, what did you like about my talk? What skill sets were important? If you send me your name, if you give me your name and email, I'll send you some like motivational emails from time to time. I still have those on my shelf, like hundreds of sheets that I use to start building our mailing list here, which is now like over 25,000 emails. But also what's on those sheets is what I needed to know what engineers needed in their careers, right? Because people were writing down, I need more help with communicating. I need more help with talking to people. I need more confidence. I need mentoring. I need speaking.
Yes.
So again, there's no excuse. Even if the internet doesn't exist, you could go out and get the information you need. You just got to be willing to do it.
Yeah, you have to be willing to do it. I love that hustle. And even back then, you're handing out the sheets. Not only you're driving across the country to speak with books and get your name out there, you're also being proactive to get feedback from the audience, which I'm certain those skills, the information, the feedback loop you created back then, I don't know when you did it, but like they're still fueling your business today. And I think that's absolutely incredible.
Absolutely. I mean, that's really probably what created the foundation. And really, that's why I think a lot of engineers, an interesting thing that's happened because of all that is because that was like 10 or 12 years ago, those people started listening to our podcast, reading the book, right? Maybe they're 25, whatever. Mm-hmm. Now they're like 40, 37, 40. They're now decision makers in their company, right? So now we get calls from people saying, hey, I've been listening to your podcast for like 10 years. We need training here. We need leadership stuff. Mm-hmm. I didn't really think about that at the time, but now I'm like, oh, wow, that's awesome. Because now like all these people that have kind of grown up with EMI in their careers are becoming the people that need to do training and do learning and development and do all these things. So that's been kind of an interesting, I guess, kind of business development. It's not really a strategy because we weren't thinking that way, but it's kind of happened that way.
Yeah, it's creating demand.
Yeah,
that's an awesome thing. If we talk about firms and what are they getting wrong in, let's say, standard operating procedures? You do a lot of training for the individual, but you're also developing people to operate within a system at a company. In my experience, I see a lack of, say, design process. And where I got this perspective, my family business is structural steel. And in growing, I led that company for a few years with my father. And in growing that business, we went through an AISC certification process, which is in pretty much every spec out there. And to me, originally, none of us really knew what AISC certification meant other than that company must be better than a company that isn't because they're AISC certified. What it really is a written down, documented process on how things are done, from like a new job comes in to estimating to proposals to shop drawings to fabricating to shipping to install. It's from start to finish, written down process, responsible positions, quality assurance, quality standards, all of that. And I just thought, that is so hypocritical of my exposure to the design world, because the companies themselves don't have this type of standardized process and documented quality assurance, but we're requiring that of the people that build the building. Do you talk about that in the training? Are you seeing that in firms? Like, is that, and I'm sure I think you deal with a lot of large civil engineering firms in your training. So I'm sure once you get to a certain scale, you have to have standard operating procedures, right? When you're crossing that $10 million, $30 million mark.
You would think, but
you would think.
It doesn't always happen.
Yeah. So I'd love your insight, because you have such a wide breadth of exposure to the industry. Is like, what are people missing? What are people doing right when it comes to standard operating procedures and process?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's one of those things that the earlier on in your company that you started, the easier it becomes, right? Because if you're bigger and all of a sudden you say, hey, we don't have any SOPs, we don't have any training, we don't have any systems, it's just a much bigger project to then get it done, right? And kind of pull a whole lot of people together. I mean, listen, I think we've dealt with all sizes of firms, and there's challenges at every level, right? The bigger you get, then you have more systems and more tools that you have to manage and organize and make sure that you use. But I think like fundamentally what's most important is kind of the atmosphere and, the true mission that you provide to your people. Because if that's all lined up, you can get whatever tools you need and get them going and get the procedures going. But you need people to be on board. Like at EMI, we do have SOPs. We got a document. We have videos. We have everything. And, I tell people, do 2 SOPs a week. If you do that, you're creating 100 a year, and we're going to be in good shape, right? But like we have our kind of guiding principles at EMI. It's very, very simple. 3 words: give, guide, grow. We give our all. We guide each other. We grow together.
Love it.
And when I tell people we're scaling, we're growing, we need to keep guiding each other here, that creates SOPs, because how are you going to guide people? You got to show them the process. You got to document the process. And so I just think like you need to set the mindset in your company early on that if we're going to be successful and grow, we need to mentor each other, and we need to capture that in the form of like SOPs and instructions. And you need to tell people that we're doing this because you're not going to do what you're doing forever. My goal is for you to become more of a leader and then lead teams. And you can't do that unless you're capturing what you do every day and you're able to explain it to other people. And if you have the right like in a bad culture, people would say, I'm not doing that because I don't want to lose my job. In a good culture, people would be like, I'll do that because I want to guide other people, help them grow, and then I'm going to grow myself, right? So
Yes.
a lot of it is setting that mindset to make sure that people are successful. And I've seen different things. Like there's companies where they're very large companies that have hired us to do PM training, and they really don't have a good PM training, which is insane to me because they might have, a lot of dollars in write-offs every year that they could just erase by having a good PM training program, right? So I don't think you could ever assume that one company has good things and one company doesn't, but I would just say that people need to understand like why they're doing something, and they're going to be more prone to writing an SOP and recording what they're doing if they know that it's helping them and the company grow.
I learned that lesson in 2018 from the Certified Value Growth Advisor program. It's like I had all this business knowledge and intent to do good, and I couldn't quite nail it. Like I felt like I'd improve one area, the other area would go down, like the yo-yo or on a seesaw by yourself. And like what you were just describing to me, I talk about a lot is mission, vision, values. If you get those things right, you can overcome so many organizational flaws because people know why they're there, where you're trying to go, your North Star, and then your core values, which I think you were just alluding to. They guide decision-making in organizational behavior. Right. And if you have those things right, and people know, like you mentioned the guiding example, like they know I gotta create a process because we need to guide the next person and where we're trying to go, right? We need to guide them to success. That's context. They know how to make the decision. They know the behavior that has to happen to deliver on that. And I think that is such an important piece. So well said.
Yeah, listen, you have to create an atmosphere where people want to come to work every day. Yeah. And when they get there, they don't think they're working, right? Like those are good philosophies. And then like when they go home, they just feel like they're home. Like it's just all like the whole day is a good day to them. So that's what we try to do here. And, there's lots of, if we go down the business rabbit hole, I could talk for too long on it, but there's nothing.
That again.
Yeah,
Another
we'll do that
day.
again. But there's nothing more important than setting the mindset right in everybody and getting something simple that you can constantly say to people. Like we say, give, guide, grow. At EMI, at the beginning of every meeting, we say, give, guide, grow, believe in the team. And we talk about that. And then like everyone's on board with that. And that's it.
Love that. So well said. Anthony, just getting to know you more today, I'm even more excited to pay attention and watch what EMI is able to accomplish. We're one of those companies, we're pretty thoughtful. We call it H&O University. We're building internal training, but just awesome. Hearing how you approach and all the things that you care about, I think I want to learn more about your program. So I'll be coming to you to talk more about how that can integrate. We use Trainual, so we're doing online video training to try to create like an entire process, make it something people can come back to when they need to.
Yeah.
In far more than just the X's and O's of engineering, right? Like what are mission, vision, values? What is the strategy? Where are we going? Like the soft skill piece. How do you give feedback, conflict resolution? Right. You have a whole company geared towards it. So when you find somebody aligned, it's worth taking a look. For sure. As we close out here, I want to hear your advice to firms as we enter into the unclear economic conditions of 2023. There's some uncertainty out there. So what's some advice you have for firms?
I think it's important that you want to be kind of people-centric or people-focused in building your firm. And even though economic times may be a little bit iffy, you still need to try to invest in your people in whatever ways you can. And that doesn't mean you need to spend a ton of money, but it means doing things like getting them together, talking to them, how are things going, what are your goals, where do you want to be, how can we help you? A lot of the stuff that you and I talked about today, Renz. Mm-hmm. But I think you need to do it consistently because people don't like to, when you ask them about their goals and then they don't hear from you for a year, right? That's not a cool thing. Like you need to keep those relationships going. Mm-hmm. And I think also something to think about is giving people opportunities to shine, right? And see what they're made of. I mean, sometimes you might not think someone's ready, but they might be, right? And how do you know unless you give them a shot, give them a project to work on, tell them to go call a client, tell them to host a meeting with a client. And I think when you do things like that, people get excited. People feel that you trust in them and you believe in them. And people start to do the things that you're going to need them to do if you want your company to grow sustainably, right? Because, listen, most companies in this industry can give people a good salary at this point, right? The civil infrastructure industry has done very well the last few years, right? Yep. that's not what drives people, at least not the people that you want in your company, right? What drives people is, I want to be a leader in your company. I want to help you achieve a certain goal. I want you to trust in me to be able to do great things. And I think the more you can do that, obviously, like every other company at EMI, we have salaries, we do all that stuff, but people never talk about that because they just want to run through a wall for EMI because they love that. They love what they're doing. Like they just want to do more of it,
Everything you mentioned there, you gave really actionable tactics on how to like invest in your people, to create trust, to get buy-in, empower them. What that's really doing is that's an organization that's developing leaders. And when I think about organizational growth and scale and impact you can have, the companies that are going to be able to do that at scale are the ones that develop leaders. They're directly correlated.
Yeah, no, 100%. And the one thing too I'll say is that not every single person in your company is going to be a leader, which is fine. But the ones that aren't, that just means you got to lead them, right? You got to find the leaders that will lead them. And that goes for everybody. Like if you don't feel like you're a people leader or a project leader, then that's fine. Like, it's not every person, every company can't be a leader.
You still have value.
Yeah, you still have value. And you are a leader in some way. I do believe that because like everyone's a leader in some way, right? Like if you have a kid, if you're a parent, you're leading your kids. If you're a teacher, you lead your students, right? So you have some capabilities, but the point is that you have to find the people that are going to lead, invest in them, and help them be great leaders. And then if you do that, they'll take care of everybody else.
Yes, 100%. Top book or podcast you'd recommend in 2022? Obviously, we have the 8. You got to go check out EMI's podcast. Get there. Top
podcast. So I love a podcast called, it's got a funny name, but it's called the Tropical MBA Podcast, which is I've been listening to for years. These guys, I'm in their entrepreneurial circle, the Dynamite Circle. So that's a good one if you're a business owner trying to build a business. I also listen to like a very interesting podcast. It's called like the Coaches and Coordinator Podcast. It's like a football coaching podcast, but I can't tell you like how many strategies I pulled out of it for building the team here, right? Because again, you have different players and different things, right? So that's a good one. And then in terms of books, I've read about 1 million books and I go through so many books for doing what we do here. I like the book Traction or Get a Grip, which is like Gino Wickman, as we use the entrepreneur operating system here. I really like that a lot. And in terms of business building, another book I like a lot is Business Made Simple by Don Miller, I think it is. I think that's right. Donald Miller.
Donald Miller.
So that's a really good book.
I didn't read that book. I read Building Your Story Brand, which was a really... I'd support anything he put out there. He puts out a good product.
He does. He puts out really good stuff and he frames things out effectively. So those are a couple of books. I mean, everything that I started here was because of the 4-Hour Work Week. Like, wow. I read that book like way back when. And
I was thinking about that when you said the Tropical MBA. I was almost picturing the 4-Hour Work Week cover.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. And so we just had really great advice on firms and what to do as we head into the uncertainty. What advice do you have for emerging leaders to close out our conversation today?
So emerging leaders, I would say the most important thing you could do in your career is build your confidence. You can read every book in the world, you can watch every video in the world, you can go to every training session in the world, but if you don't have confidence in your own abilities, you won't be able to use those skills, you won't be able to use the information in the book. And the way that you build confidence is you have to get out there and you have to try things and you have to lead people and you have to make mistakes and you have to fail, unfortunately. But
get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, get out of your comfort zone. If you're not comfortable in your own skin, if you're not confident, then you will not be able to succeed at the big level as a leader. And so, I would just say keep investing in yourself, keep building your confidence, do a lot of mindset work. And, I always like, my favorite movies are like the Rocky Fours, the Karate Kid, Remember the Titans, all these stories where people are like, there's no way in hell you can do this, but people did it, right?
Yes, 100%.
So I'm kind of a sucker for those movies because I believe in that, and you just got to keep pushing that.
I love that advice. You build confidence by the effort, the intent, and the consistency of what you put into achieving something. Don't put your confidence in, like, don't hang your confidence on the result. Put it into the effort, the character, and what your intent was.
100%.
Anthony, thank you so much for joining me today. I can't wait to learn more about you. Until next time, thank you so much.
Thank you, Renz. It was my pleasure.
Everyone, can't thank you enough for tuning in today. I hope you got a ton out of today's conversation. And if you could do us one favor, if you did get value, please like, share, and comment. Subscribe on whatever channel you're tuning in on. Please leave a review. It helps us expand and grow and support more people. That's the end goal. We want to bring the insights of these amazing guests to as many people as possible. Thank you.